Book 3, Chapter 97. 3 spheres: pure consciousness, mental and physical. Brahma said, O Venerable Sage, from all you have explained, I have come to understand that this grandeur of the universe, being the work of the divine mind, is all derived from the same. Vasishtha answered, as already said, the mind having assumed a substantial form manifested itself like water in a mirage, raised by the shining blaze of its own light. The mind, within the spirit of Brahma, became one with the contents of the world, now showing itself in the form of man and now appearing as a god. Somewhere he shows himself as a demon, at another place like a yaksha. Here he was as a Gandharva, and there in the form of a Kinnara. The vast expanse of the mind includes the many countries and pictures of many cities and inhabitable places. Such being the capacity of the mind, there is no counting the millions of bodies contained within it, like the trees and plants in a forest. All those are not worth our consideration in inquiry about the mind. It was this mind that spread out the world with all its content. Other than the mind, there exists nothing but the Supreme Spirit. The soul is beyond every category. It is omnipresent and the substratum of all existence. It is by the power of this soul that the mind moves and manifests itself. The mind is known as the cause of the body. The body is the work of the mind. The mind is born and becomes extinct with the body, which the soul does not. The soul has no quality that belongs to the mind. By right reasoning, the mind is found to be a perishable object. When the mind perishes, the individual soul attains final liberation. The desires of the mind are the bondage of its reincarnation. But the dissolution of the mind and its desires secures liberation. After mental desires cease, there is no more exertion for act. This state is called liberation of individual souls from trouble and care. The mind, thus released, never comes to be born and die again. This is a very succinct and illuminating statement about liberation, moksha, when it arises, in relationship to the mind. Very clearly in verse 10, when the mind perishes, the individual soul finds liberation. The dissolution of the mind and its desires secures its liberation. So this is very important. The mind is known to exist when there are thoughts. Because thoughts arise in the mind. When the mind ceases to exist, when there is no mind, there can be no thought. When thoughts cease, yet one remains aware, awake. That is liberation. Now, it may not be that the mind permanently ceases. The mind may cease, and then, a little while, here it comes again. So we flicker in and out of liberation for a while. Also, the stopping of the mind must carry over in such a way that the awareness transcends and is above the other three states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and sleeping. If the mind stops only in the state of waking, but then one goes to sleep and there are dreams, what's happening? The mind is active, isn't it? Because the dreams arise in the mind. The dreams are vivid thoughts, basically. And if there are no dreams, but the mind still exists, then the mind will shut off and consciousness will shut off. Then we have deep sleep, where there is no consciousness. And then we know, well, we haven't arrived yet. If we still have deep sleep, where there is no consciousness, if we're unaware of our deep sleep until after it's passed, until it becomes history, then we think, well, must have been deeply asleep. I don't remember anything. Then we haven't arrived. The witnessing must be continual, 24 hours a day. And the witnessing, to be continual, 24 hours a day, it has to come from that state that is beyond the mind, that is beyond the physical, and is even beyond all the subtle bodies. That witnessing must arise from transcendental senses. Witnessing as its seat in Pratibhadarshasa. And we have a sutra in Yoga Sutras of Patanjali about these absolute transcendental senses. So that's another requirement of liberation. But essentially, when the mind ceases, then the awareness that is always there, but hidden by the activity of their mind, is allowed to zoom forth. And then we have liberation. Verse 12. Rama said, Sage, you have said before that human nature is principally of three kinds: the good, the gentle, and the base. These are the three gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas. And it is owing to the good or bad nature of their minds that men differ from one another. Now, please tell me, how could the wonderful mind with its good or bad propensities that are lacking in divine consciousness originate from pure consciousness? Which used to reply, Ram, know that there are three spheres of infinite emptiness that are at immense distances from one another. These are the intellectual, mental, and physical spheres. These environments are common to all mankind, and they are spread out everywhere. They have all sprung and come to being from the essence of divine consciousness. Let's look at these three spheres in terms of the koshas. Physical sphere would be the Annamaya kosha, obviously, but it must also include the Pranamaya kosha. We divide those into two, but it's an artificial division. It's a division that has arisen from a fracturing or disintegration between those two koshas. They're not really separate koshas. Always, they should be one kosha. Prana, Anna, Maya kosha. This is the way it is in the absolute realm. We're a reflection of that. In the absolute realm, we have the Anna kosha surrounded and interpenetrated by Svarupa Shakti, which is parallel to, or the origin of, the prana, Maya kosha. And then beyond the prana annamaya kosha, we have the mental, or the manomaya kosha. And beyond that, the intellectual or vijnana maya kosha. Well, these are the three spheres of existence. Beyond vijnana maya kosha is ananda maya kosha. But ananda maya kosha is not existent in terms of this relative universe, because it is this relative universe. It is the covering of consciousness of the creator of this universe. So in essence, there are within this universe only three koshas, three coverings of consciousness. So that's another perspective we can take, as long as we're confining our analysis to what is existent, standing out from, not unified with the consciousness of this universe, which is Anandamaya Kosha. Anandamaya Kosha is only known when we step outside of this universe. When we leave this universe and we are observing from the absolute realm, then we see Anandamaya Kosha. But until we do that, we do not see it. We don't know that it's there. It is the substratum of all the entities, all the existences, all the things that are standing out in this universe. Now, this is a parallel pattern. It's the parallel pattern of the jiva and Shiva. Shiva is pure, absolute consciousness, arising from Shiva is something that exists, something that stands out from Shiva. And that which stands out from Shiva is Jiva. And then that which stands out from Jiva is the existence within the universe of Jiva. So Jiva creates a universe. Now the universe of Jiva is parallel to the universe of Krishna. Krishna is like Mahajiva. Krishna, hosting any sort of mental activity, having any thought at all, creating myriads of universes, eternally, spontaneously. Then Jiva, having a thought, creates individual universe, And then each one of us, if we appreciate ourselves as existent within this universe, then we find ourselves as individuals. So it's a fractal nature, as above, so below, but of a different order, is a statement that summarizes that. Verse 16, space is both inside and outside of everything, pervading throughout all nature. Space implies being occupied by something or its absence. Space is called the empty sphere of consciousness. Space is called the sphere of consciousness, which embraces all time, space, and time, and which has spread out the other spheres or environments. Consciousness is the highest and best of all. Space is akasha. Space is beyond all the other elements that create something that is existent. Space is existent as well. Verse 16, Akash is both inside and outside of everything. We practice our Flying Sutra. We're contrasting the difference between Akash and the physical body. In reality, there is no difference. But by thinking about bringing into awareness the difference between Akash and the body, and harmonizing that and eliminating that difference, allows the physical body to operate without the restriction of the physical realm. Physical realm has many restrictions. Physical realm has mass, it has weight. It has size. So in the physical realm, we have weight. The body has weight. It has size. Size is larger than the porous nature of the walls and the ceiling and the floor. So we're confined to the room. If we don't have a door or a window, we can't get out of the room. As long as we are not identified with Akash. But Akash is both inside and outside of everything. So when we identify with Akash, then it's no problem. We're already outside the room. We have just chosen to have our awareness and our focus of senses to be confined to the inside of the room. As soon as we drop that false imposition, let that go, then we're out of the room. We left the room. We can go anywhere. Verse 18, the physical sphere, bhutakosh. Element space, contains all created beings and extends to all 10 directions, about, above, and below us. It is a space filled with air that supports the clouds and waters above the sky. Then the emptiness of the mental sphere, chittakosh, mind space, which has also sprung from the sphere of consciousness, chittakosh, consciousness. Bhutakosh, chittakosh, and chittakosh. These are the 3 spheres. Likewise has consciousness or its cause like the others, as the day is the source of all works and animal activities. What we call the mind is the spoiled intellect that views itself as a dull thing amidst the gross material objects of the physical sphere. It thinks of both spheres from where it is born and where it is placed. I have made use of the metaphor of spheres for the understanding of the unenlightened. Figures are used to instruct the unenlightened and not to enlighten the enlightened. In the consciousness sphere, you will see one supreme Brahma filling the whole space, without parts or attributes, and unintelligible only to the, and intelligible only to the enlightened. The ignorant need to be instructed with appropriate words and precise language, showing this distinction between monotheism and belief in 2 gods, which is unnecessary for the instruction of the enlightened. So what Vasishtha is telling us here is he's using words to relate to the individual, the consciousness of the listener, to instruct them, to allow them to transcend the boundaries of their awareness. But once we have transcended the boundaries of our awareness, we don't need words. If there are only 2 enlightened people in a room, what do you hear? You don't hear anything, do you? Because they don't speak. They don't need to speak. There is no communication back and forth because one does not have anything to say to instruct the other. Once an individual reaches moksha, they only act to support the universe. And the universe exists only to support the unenlightened, the jivas who have not achieved release from their boundaries and are still captured as existing within the universe. So there's nothing to be said. Verse 24, I have contrived to explain to you the nature of divine knowledge by the parable of the three spheres, which will enlighten you as long as you are in dark on the subject. The consciousness sphere is hidden by ignorance. So we are led to look into the mental and physical spheres. They are delusive as sunbeams in a mirage and as destructive as the flames of fire. Pure consciousness, being changed to the state of the changeful mind, takes a debased figure. Then, being confounded in itself, the mind weaves the magic web of the world in which it becomes entangled. The ignorant, guided by the dictates of their perverted mind, know nothing about the nature of consciousness, which is identical with the Supreme. So the witness, who unwittingly mistakes white shells for bright silver, are seen to labor under their delusion until they are freed from it by the clear light of their understanding. This is a very beautiful perspective. That we can take to understand better the nature of individual and divine karmic traces. Karmic traces, of course, are another way to understand how the mind arises and when and under what conditions the mind goes away, the mind disappears. Karmic traces take us into the realm of sadhana. When we're only speaking of pure consciousness and how the mind weaves the magic web of the world, we're in the realm of pure philosophy. Nothing practical here. How does one read verse 26 and work out a method to disentangle one's self from the magic web of the world? Not possible, is it? It's pure philosophy. If we want to get into the world of beyond philosophy, the world of physics, world of dealing with the situation of physical confinement of consciousness to one body, to one set of senses, to one perspective, to one viewpoint. Then we have to go into the realm of karmic traces. Individual karmic traces must first be tackled. Individual karmic traces are the magic web of the world from the perspective of the individual, existing as separate from the creator of the universe. Divine karmic traces are the magic web of the world from within the mind of the creator. But the creator, of course, is relatively enlightened, just like the 5 levels of moksha. Moksha level 1 is relative enlightenment, not absolute enlightenment. Absolute enlightenment is beyond moksha level 5. Doesn't need a level. It's beyond all the levels. But in moksha level 1, we are literally only liberated from the physical sphere. We're beyond the physical sphere in moksha level 1. But we're still confined to the mental sphere, monomaya kosha. So moksha level 1 is just the very beginning and isn't really enlightenment in the absolute sense. And while it can be and should be, and with careful attention, will be permanent, it doesn't have to be permanent. We can lose it. It's a bit dangerous to reach moksha level 1 and take our focus off of the objective, off the ball. As soon as we stop focusing on achieving the absolute enlightenment, could fall back into that well of samsara. Because we only have a tunnel in the mountain ranges of karmic traces that are confining us to existence, making us believe and know that we exist. So as long as we realize and know that we exist, we're not at absolute enlightenment. So we don't stop our sadhana. Sadhana is the practice of techniques for balancing karmic traces. When we first start out on this journey, normally we start out with turning the mind inward and transcending. We start with dharana. We start with a sadhana technique of dharana, thinking a mantra. That's how we always get started. And that allows us to transcend this physical realm. And then we begin to wake up, lights begin to turn on, we begin to see our existence as it is. But if we stop there with dharana, we don't go beyond. We don't take any additional sadhana. We're going to get stopped at just moksha level 1. And that's dangerous. As long as we have a physical body, to be in moksha level 1 is a dangerous condition. It is a razor thin path to traverse the physical world in a physical body in moksha level 1. It's easy to fall off that path. If we fall off that path, then we have to come back again. We have to be born again. We have to start over again in a physical body. So we be very careful when we reach moksha level 1 to stay on the path. We have to always keep our attention on the path and make progress on the path through these various spiritual techniques of balancing individual karmic traces. Now the ego is going to jump up. The ego, of course, being that residual of individual karmic traces that is still there when we reach moksha level 1, cosmic consciousness. Ego is still there, wide awake, alive and well, and very dangerous, because ego will see, ooh, I'm almost eliminated here. I have to stop this progress. It's easy. I'll just stop the meditation. I'm enlightened after all. Yippee, I have arrived. Very dangerous situation when ego does that. And we've probably heard about stories of people who have apparently achieved enlightenment and then lost it. We maybe have had those experiences ourselves. I hear these experiences. I was enlightened for 6 months. It was unbelievable. It was the most astounding and wonderful state of consciousness. And then somehow I lost it. What happened? So we have to be careful. Stay on the meditation. As long as we understand, as long as our experience is I exist. So stop the meditation.